One of my things that I say a lot about the work that I do is no coincidences, because it really is insane the things that I see happen between horses and people.
Okay.
And I'm like,
Give me an example, if it's not revealing.
yeah, I'm trying to think of something that I can share. So this is an example that I've used before. I know that this person doesn't mind me sharing. This happened like years ago. I had this horse that I was fostering, and he had what's called a stable vice, which is a bad habit that sometimes horses get from stressful living conditions.
Stable vice. So when he's upset, he goes into the stable? I know what a vice is.
When he's upset, he displays this behavior that's brought on by stress of horse management, typical horse management.
Why is it called a stable vice?
Because I don't know why, because horses live in stables and they normally display the behavior when they're cooped up too much or bored or not fed right.
When you say stable vice, my mind's like, okay, he has this vice where if he gets uncomfortable or scared, maybe he goes to the stable, But
no, but it's a group of
behaviors
that are grouped under what are called stable vices, and they're basically brought about by stressful living conditions or mismanagement that actually are standard.
What was his stable vice?
His stable vice was called cribbing, which is when a horse braces their teeth on something solid and they like pull back and they suck in air and it makes like a burping noise. It releases endorphins and things for them. I kind of liken it to people like chew their nails, like they get nervous and like this.
It could be an anxiety reaction at a horse level. Okay.
So anyway, that he had this stable vice. He was an older horse. He did that for his entire life. He was a cribber.
How often?
Constant if he had the opportunity. Just a lot. So when he retired from his job, and I fostered him. So he came to live at my house, and he was in a completely different lifestyle, much more natural, where he got to be outside a lot. He wasn't cooped up.
Wasn't any requirements. He was just living.
Yeah, he had access to food all the time instead of separate meals. It was a much more horse-friendly style of living.
You were pampering the babies.
He stopped cribbing after decades. He stopped cribbing, which is really notable.
Like, a smoker that just cold turkeys or something.
It is, right? Yeah.
So he just dropped a vice.
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
And so...
so it was a reaction to his environment, necessarily.
Yeah, and the stress that he didn't feel anymore. So anyway, I had him for months or a year or whatever. Anyway, no cribbing. So I had this one woman come for a session with me, and this specific horse, I put him in the space, and she went in with him, and within 30 seconds of her being next to him, he walked over the fence and started cribbing.
Like, she brought anxiety to him, essentially. Like, because he must have read her body language or whatever.
Something. I mean, the fact is...
Did she tell you her intent?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what
like,
her
was it, like, I got to fire somebody, and then I'm real anxious about it or something,
I don't remember.
Okay. But he immediately started cribbing.
He starts cribbing. So the fact is that she went in the space, and within 30 seconds he was cribbing. That's a fact.
And
I don't always put a lot of stuff around it, because that's for the person to do for themselves based on what they want to get out of the session.
But you looking, you're like, whoa. Yeah. They were like, whoa, is that normal for that horse? But they don't know.
Yeah, so she's over there, petting him and standing there. Meanwhile, he's cribbing away, and I'm just watching. And after a while, she says, "What's he doing?" So I just answered a question. I said, just like I explained to you, it's a stable vice, and it's brought on by, unhealthy living lifestyle, and it's him releasing his stress. He's anxious. And all of a sudden, this look came across her face, and she looks at me, and she was like, I do that. She was like, I have my own version of cribbing. And she told me what her unhealthy behaviors were. And, he continued to crib while she's telling me about this. So it was a moment where we could stop and identify her behaviors, and then talk about, was that something that she wanted to keep in her life? Was that a healthy coping mechanism or healthy behaviors or things like that? And is it okay?
Yeah, see.
Did it get too hot?
I don't know what it was, but it decided it didn't want to be on anymore, so it probably got too hot. Anyways, so she went in about like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so she identified her own behaviors that she kind of related to cribbing.
Oh, yeah?
And when I was able to kind of coach her into a different headspace about it, the horse stopped cribbing and was quiet. And
can you elaborate on that at all? Like, how did you coach her into we'll say, That's just very vague, like nail biting.
It is vague.
So if she was like, oh, well, I do this when I get worked up or something, and then.
Yeah, so we talked about what would be a healthier alternative. What are her options? What are healthier alternatives to her destructive behaviors or her vice? And we talked about those. And I actually, the nice thing about with the horses is it's an experience. It's not just talking. You're not just sitting there talking about it and then hopefully you go home and do it. It's actually an experience.
Yeah.
So I was able to have her, stop and visualize her engaging in a healthy behavior instead of an unhealthy one. And when she was actually able to put herself, in that position in her head or like visualizing it, the horse would stop his behavior. And then, I would step away and it would just take her a minute or two on her own for her mind to go back to her unhealthy thoughts. And as soon as she would do it, the horse would walk away.
And she was probably blown away.
She was blown away. So, you can't deny there was this pattern between her.
No, and it gives me chills.
Right.
A lot of people talk about energy.
Yeah.
And you can just tell, we're good at reading body language because I think it's a human. We've been evolved as humans to read through communication because I think this.
Yes.
When we were cavemen, we're rock, wheel, we don't communicate. So I think there's a form of body language, and body language is way more stronger.
Yeah, it is.
And the people can translate that to energy. And so maybe horses have their own form because they've been domesticated for insert history buff here, maybe I don't know, 250,000 years or something.
Well, just their innate nature as a prey animal, they need to be aware of the body language, the
horses
energy.
Are a prey animal.
Horses are a prey animal. So they have learned to survive by being able to read the body language, the energy, and the intentions of their other beings in their environment. That's how they survive. So they can read us from a mile away, and they know stuff about us that we might not even be aware of on our own, which is why they're so good at this type of work.
So they are wild, and I think a lot of these animals in the wild are, how I want to preface this. Okay, so some animals can definitely tell when you're hostile and when you're not, or generally they're all just in their nature is they're bad, like predators. I know there's examples up there. I can't retrieve them all, but let's say for example, I'll make a weird one. Rat sees bird, it's bye, it just knows. It's not curious. It's in its nature. And that's probably not a good example, but there's definitely instances where, especially in prey, where they know that that's bad. There's no exceptions.
Right.
And,
because that's how they survive.
Yes.
They've survived on their instincts. They've not survived on reasoning it out for an hour while they're waiting to see if they're right or not.
And some of that is in people too. And I've seen people talk about even babies. Babies not necessarily reading, but there's certain things that are in you. You could feed a baby food, and it'll be a 6-month-old baby, but then you put a piece of meat on the grill and it smells it and it's curious, and it's it knows food or something. And you don't teach it that,
right?
And this can go throughout the whole early stage of child development and whatnot. But now, wow, I mean, I guess. So
anyway, I guess where this started was their confirmation bias, but
that's awesome, and you can't deny it.
You can't. So I see this time after time after time after time after time after time
and
after
all
time.
Their own cases,
and they're each just so different. And I think you can call them coincidences all you want, but when you have them happening that frequently, so undeniably. They're not coincidences anymore. There's more to it, and it doesn't matter if you think it's magical or spiritual or factual or science-based, because it's all of that. I mean, to me, it's all of it. To me, there's science behind what happens in these, and there's also a spiritual component to what happens. To me, anyway, that's how I see. I see a lot of different levels.
You could definitely look at biologically why it would make sense.
Yeah.
And I think they're all innately aware because they are pack animals, at least in the wild. And then if they could see one's distress and his hair's up, I'm they're all on. What are you looking at? And it's predator run. So maybe it's a simple or it's a complex form of that.
Yeah. And there's been times when there's definitely there's undeniably a spiritual component too. For example, when I'm doing a session, I often have a clipboard or pen and paper nearby in case I want to write anything down that I don't want to forget. Notes. There have been times when I felt.
I got chili, so
I may do that too. So there have been times when I have felt another presence in the session, be it animal or person, and I will make my own notes about who I feel is around, and not just for myself, just so I don't forget. And then, for example, I was working with this one guy once, and I felt the presence of a person around, and I made a quick description of who I felt was around. And at the end of the session, so like 45 minutes later, we're talking, and
this
all
is
of a sudden,
private?
this was private.
Okay.
He brings up his grandfather who had passed away, and he says, in the middle of the session, I really felt like my grandfather was here with me. Ooh, and I was like, stop. I said, stop. I was like, don't say anything right now.
Yeah.
I handed him my notes, and he read my notes, and he was like,
jaw dropping?
Yeah.
Man, he gave you like chills. They weren't cold chills. You're like, come on.
So I guess confirmation bias, yes, and I don't.
But
that's part of it.
You're not on their confirmation bias, and then yet you're able to confirm without them telling you, and so that's wild.
Yeah,